I have another story for you today. It's about three special friends who, with God's help, make good choices. And then He blesses them and makes them the wisest men in the nation of Babylon. And you know what? God can help us make good decisions every day. I hope you enjoy the story. It was noontime in the city of Jerusalem. The temple school for boys had been dismissed. Daniel and his three friends were hurrying home to lunch. Then suddenly the trumpet sounded. "Tahi, tahi, tahi," shrilled the trumpet. It was noontime call to prayer. 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, a priest came out on the temple porch and blew on the ram's horn trumpet. "Ta'i, ta'i, ta'i, it's time for prayers." Daniel turned about face towards the temple. His friends turned about face towards the temple. All the people of Jerusalem stopped whatever they were doing and faced towards the temple. With heads bowed, they prayed to the God of heaven. At home, Daniel's mother served pulse for lunch. Pulse is a food like beans and vegetables, brown bread, berries, and dates. Daniel liked pulse. Pulse would make him grow tall. Pulse would make him grow strong. Pulse would make him get good grades in school. Daniel, his 3 friends, and all the people of Jerusalem felt safe in their city. For hadn't the city high stone walls around it, and were not strong gates in the wall, with watchtowers above each gate, where the watchmen kept watch day and night? If Daniel listened, he would hear the watchman call, "First watch, all is well." And later, "Second watch, all is well." And still later, "Third watch, all is well." But one day all was not well. The watchman hurried out of the watchtower, blew a warning blast on his trumpet, and shouted, "An enemy approaches!" Quickly the gates were shut and barred. Men mounted the city walls. Boys climbed on rooftops. Far away, so far away that soldiers and camels looked like a line of creeping, crawling bugs, came the dreaded army, the feared army of Babylon. Closer, closer, closer the army came. The army of Babylon pitched a camp near Jerusalem. The soldiers built great battering ram machines and pushed them up beside the wall. Crash! 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 Finally, after many days, part of the stone wall gave away. The army of Babylon marched into Jerusalem. Some of the soldiers climbed the hill to the temple and took away the temple's golden vessels, as the king of Babylon had commanded them to do. Some of the soldiers stood guard, while other soldiers took men and boys prisoners. They took Daniel and his 3 friends. The army marched the prisoners towards Babylon. Soldiers on camels led the way. Then came the prisoners, chained together. Next, the donkeys bearing the golden vessels. Then more soldiers. For days and days the procession marched across the hot, sandy desert. Daniel's sandals wore out. His friends' sandals wore out. The hot sand burned their feet. They were thirsty. They were tired. But on and on they had to march until they came to Babylon. The king of Babylon sat on his royal throne, while the soldiers paraded the prisoners before him. Said the king to the captain of the army, "Choose boys from among the prisoners, goodly boys. Give them food from my table to eat, and give them my wine to drink. They shall go to school for 3 years to learn the wisdom of Babylon." Daniel and his 3 friends were chosen. Prince Malzar was given charge. over the boys. That evening, Daniel and his 3 friends talked together. "We cannot eat the king's food," said Daniel. "It has been offered to idols. And besides, the king's food is not the best food for boys. Neither can we drink the king's wine." "What shall we do?" the boys asked one another. Then Daniel thought of a plan. "Let's ask Melzar to give us pulse to eat and water to drink instead of the king's food." "That's a good plan," agreed the 3 friends. Daniel and his 3 friends went to see Prince Melzar. They bowed politely, then asked for pulse and water instead of the king's food and wine. Melzar shook his head. "No! If the king should see you looking thinner than the other boys and learn that I have given you pulse and water, he might even cut off my head." "Please try us for 10 days, begged Daniel. So Melzar agreed to give them pulse and water for 10 days. "Then we shall see," he said. Although Daniel and his 3 friends were far from home, and there was no sound of a ram's horn trumpet to remind them, they did not forget to pray. Morning, noon, and night, Daniel opened his window towards the temple back in Jerusalem and prayed to the God in heaven. He asked God to bless the pulse and water, and to please let it make them strong, so that Melzar might know that pulse and water were better for boys than the king's food and wine. When the 10 days had passed, Prince Melzar called all the boys before him. He looked at their faces and he felt their arms. He found that Daniel and his friends were fairer, fatter than the other boys who had ate the king's food and drank the king's wine. So ever after, during the 3 years of school, Prince Melzar gave Daniel and his friends pulse to eat and water to drink. 1, 2, 3 years went by. School was over for Daniel and his friends. They had grown taller. They had grown wiser. The king himself would test them. Daniel and his friends dressed in clean clothes. With hair combed and sandals polished, they stood before the king of Babylon. The king asked them question after question, and lo, the king found Daniel and his 3 friends 10 times wiser than all the men of Babylon.